Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Schenectady. I'm Geoff Lundy, and any pronoun works well for me. Wherever you are on your journey of finding truth and meaning, whether you arrived joyous or with a heavy heart, we are grateful that you have chosen to be here this morning.
Good morning. Happy Labor Day weekend. It's not Labor Day yet. I'm LB. Any pronouns work for me.
When LB suggested the tolerance paradox as a theme, it brought to my mind tolerance versus acceptance. I'll start with definitions because that's where I started. I looked up tolerance and acceptance. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, tolerance is the capacity to endure pain or hardship. Sympathy or indulgence for beliefs or practices differing from or conflicting with one's own. The act of allowing something. The allowed deviation from something. The capacity of the body to endure or become less responsive to a substance, such as a drug, or a physiological result, especially with repeated use or exposure. Also, the immunological state marked by unresponsiveness to a specific antigen. Relative capacity of an organism to grow or thrive when subjected to an unfavorable environmental factor. The maximum amount of pesticide residue that may lawfully remain in food. Acceptance is the quality or state of being accepted or acceptable. The act of accepting something or someone, the fact of being acceptable. Agreeing either expressly or by conduct to the act or offer of another so that a contract is concluded and the parties become legally bound. The act of accepting a time draft or bill of exchange for payment when due, according to the specifications, an accepted bill or draft of exchange. Pretty dry stuff. And I don't care much for definitions that use the word being defined within them. But there are a variety of uses for these two words. Some are more germane to our thoughts today than others. I also looked up acceptance versus tolerance. An AI prompt showed up in less than a second while the other pages to explore loaded. Normally, I ignore AI, but on this day, as I had a slow connection, I read it. The gist of that explanation was that tolerance of prejudice, for example, was preferable, more noble than accepting prejudice. I see that logic, but it wasn't at all what I expected to find. I follow a spiritual path which clearly states that acceptance is actually the key to my resolving all my problems. So I moved on to other now loaded explanations. The Oxford Review briefings sum up the general trend fairly concisely. 1. Mindset. Acceptance reflects a positive, open-minded attitude towards diversity, while tolerance may stem from a sense of obligation or indifference. 2. Depth of understanding. Acceptance includes a deeper understanding and appreciation of diversity, whereas tolerance may involve surface-level acknowledgement without genuine empathy or engagement. 3. Impact on relationships. Acceptance nurtures meaningful connections and relationships built on mutual respect and understanding, whereas tolerance may lead to superficial interactions or even perpetuate underlying biases. I went back to my initial search page to jot down notes from the AI explanation. AI had changed its mind. Perhaps it had done insufficient research in that less than 1 second it used the first time I went there. Maybe it read the articles I had and came to a new conclusion. The Oxford Review briefings align with the principles I believe. For me, tolerance is what I try to practice until acceptance is achieved. The theory is fake it till you make it. I accept that I have racial, sexual, economic, and various social prejudices and biases. I objectify, judge, or comment far more than I like to admit, far more than I like. In its way, it's unacceptable. So I tolerate their existence. I possess them. They are in me. And when they present themselves, I have the opportunity to address them, to work on them. If I could not tolerate my own thinking, well, that would be a level of insanity I strive to avoid. I lived in denial for a long enough time. I need not return there. I work with the fact that they are there. It's an ongoing project. I am so far from perfection that I have enough on my hands or in my mind for the long run until my end. Speaking of work, I spend approximately 42 and a half hours nearly every week employed at a small machine shop, a rather conservative environment, as I knew when I interviewed there. Out of 19 people, 16 are at some level of MAGA. Of the 3 remaining, one works remotely, and another from his citadel of old white man privilege. No dissenting words are forthcoming. He prefers to blend in. He's a few years younger than I am. That leaves me. Now, I do not thrill to the challenge of confrontation. I make it a point to be civil with everyone at work as best I can. I prefer my work environment to be friendly. But over the past 8 years, we have had numerous interesting conversations. Someone says something, and I ask, not innocently, would you explain that? No, I really don't know what you mean. That's not a fact. It's an opinion. What is the source for that observation or declaration? I think you get the idea. These are the same questions I use on myself to dig into my own unpleasantness. Also, since I possess a device that can look up sources in quotes quickly, I use it to say, no, that's not true. Here's the real statistic, or that's a fraudulent accusation, or a redacted quote, or a complete fiction. My coworkers enjoy these conversations less than I do. Truth be told, we rarely have them anymore. They know my position on most any subject. I make it clear to them. I don't know what they say when I'm not present. I can guess. I have no illusions. I'm not changing minds or attitudes. My coworkers aren't as amenable to change as AI. I am simply and clearly, yet politely stating my beliefs to them. I am making sure they know where I stand. Yesterday, Carolyn and I participated in a peaceful rally in downtown Boston Spa, Liberty and Justice for All. I do not believe anyone who was ever so slightly inconvenienced or annoyed at our demonstration of unity and commitment to liberty and justice for everyone was converted to the cause. It was to inform them that we are here, all around them, that we are vocal and intent. Perhaps it will encourage someone afraid to be vocal to find their voice, perhaps even to take a stand. There's a quote and an adage I use to help guide my life. The first is from the Mishnah, the first written compendium of oral Jewish law by Hillel Haggadol, Hillel the Elder. Imain ani li mili, ukshanani latsmi ma'ani, ve'im lo akshav ematai. If I am not for myself, who is for me? If I am only for myself, What am I? And if not now, when? And the adage, then I cannot recall who spoke or wrote it, despite an online search. So I have to give you my paraphrase as I use it today. It's important for people to know what you stand for. It's equally important for people to know what you won't stand for. With varying levels of success and failure, I work to put these ideals into my life every day.
So in 2017, when I was working at the University of Florida in Gainesville, the right-wing white supremacy conspiracy theorist Richard Spencer was booked to speak on campus by one of the conservative student groups. At the time, I was working in the Vice President of Student Affairs office, and the staff across our division was responsible for the student union and campus programs, supporting the students and staffing the event. As you could imagine, the announcement of Spencer coming to campus caused a major uprising among students and community members in the city of Gainesville. Gainesville is a college town and heavily influenced by the campus in both good ways and bad. The argument for allowing Spencer to speak on campus was free speech. But Spencer's visit cost millions in security, considering his visit was scheduled not long after the deadly protests of alt-right neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia. The campus, city, and county police were coordinated, as were all student affairs staff on campus. We had multiple meetings a week to coordinate efforts, plans to keep students and community members safe, and simultaneously protests were taking place every single day. Classes were canceled out of concern for safety, not from protesters against Spencer, but from his supporters. Campus leaders worried that we may be set up to be another Charlottesville. The day came and the campus was a ghost town, except for near where the venue was that Spencer was to be speaking. There, the streets were filled, the protests were loud and raucous. Some physical altercations took place between supporters of Spencer and counter protesters, but for the most part, it was an uneventful event. The speech happened, students and community members protested from within the venue as well. And then everyone went home, and life moved on. But being on the front lines of that experience gave me a crash course in the ways in which speech and tolerating the intolerant has major consequences. Not only did allowing Spencer's intolerant speaking event cost millions of dollars, it had chilling consequences for students on campus that day. Students were afraid to come out of their dorms and walk around, and we had heard from hundreds of students and concerned parents on a hotline about how their kid was afraid to go get lunch or leave their building. Now, while the argument to allow Spencer to visit campus was free speech oriented, and that campuses have the duty to uphold the rights of free speech, I am not a lawyer, and there are likely many folks in here that could explain the legality and nuances of free speech. But what solidified for me that day was the evidence of Karl Popper's quote. Popper was an Austrian-British philosopher, academic, and social commentator. And in The Open Society and Its Enemies, published in 1945, Popper wrote, "Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed, and tolerance with them. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant." Now, Popper's theory of tolerance has been showing up on my social media much more over the last 8 months for obvious reasons. But I can't help but think about the events surrounding Spencer's visit and how the University of Florida and the state of Florida overall has experienced an increase in intolerance from state government, with banning of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and services across the state, the Don't Say Gay bill, and other dangerous policies that are stripping Floridians of their rights. Spencer's visit and the willingness of the university to tolerate the intolerance that Spencer spewed that day and every day before and after is part of the willingness of the leadership of the university and the state to tolerate the intolerant. And thus, things have become less tolerant, at least from a leadership level. Now, I want to make a side note here. There's a tremendous amount of activism in Florida. I was one of those people from the North that had geographic bias against the South, seeing it only through history and stories of it being less progressive than the North. And while there are challenges there for sure, Florida is a beautifully complex place, much more than the Florida man jokes that we like to see online. Okay, back to tolerance. Now, Popper does suggest that violence might be a response to intolerance, especially if the intolerance threatens lives. And I am not going to suggest that violence is the way. But what his theory does make me think about is at least grappling with a discomfort that challenging the intolerance comes with, and asking ourselves if we are all ready to get more uncomfortable, both emotionally and physically, in the name of fighting against intolerance. Geoff did a wonderful example of the everyday tactics to push against intolerance in intrapersonal relationships. Some other examples that come to mind: community members in Washington, D.C., taking to the streets every night to make noise and confront National Guard members as they patrol neighborhoods. I actually have a client in DC that working for a school, and she shared a picture of her and her husband and their kids, because the National Guard was in their neighborhood, and their 7-year-old daughter was making a lot of noise and saying to National Guard troops, now a 7-year-old saying to National Guard troops in full garb, "Shame on you! What are you doing? Shame on you!" If that's not like, wisdom in the face of power, I don't know what is. I was very moved by that story. Other examples: neighbors following and videotaping ICE agents as they unlawfully search for people, making the ICE agents own up to what they're doing. And then confronting family members when they are speaking untruths, even when it means the relationship will be impacted. This last one has hit really home for me. My expression of the value of centering love asks me to confront others in various ways when untruths, especially the harmful ones, are being spoken. And I used to think that centering love meant that I had to make sure the other person felt love when I was challenging them. But through my experience with grief after the election, I came to realize and feel grounded that with the fact that centering love was a verb, an action by which I used to fuel me to challenge the intolerance around me, especially when I'm feeling tired or scared of speaking up. That love for myself and others that are impacted by intolerance and hateful views was what compelled me to do something, to say something, to not tolerate the intolerant language and behavior whenever I had a chance to, even if it meant the relationships were going to be impacted. Now, I'm not going around picking fights or arguments with people, but it does mean that I can't be afraid to challenge the conditions that are around me, even with the people I love, even if it means the sake of the relationship is going to be uncomfortable. Now, I want to show you something that I use in my work quite often. Now, for those that aren't familiar and haven't heard me share before, I run a diversity, equity, inclusion, organizational change consulting firm, and we do a lot of culture assessments. And we have a survey that we use for our organizations. And this is one of those tools, we call it the tolerance thermometer. And when we do cultural assessments with the organizations, we ask survey participants to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how inclusive their work environments are. And mostly this is in the context of work and employment. 10 is a fully inclusive, affirming environment. 0 is a threatening work environment. And 5 is accepting but not welcoming, AKA tolerant. And we have used this tool with many organizations over the last 5 years, and interesting patterns emerge. It probably looks very small, but what you can see is there are 3 zones here: green, yellow, orange, and on the top is the most included, and at the bottom is the least included, based on what those participants said. Now, every single time, save one place, the top 3 groups are always white people, men, and people that are affluent, people that have high socioeconomic status. Usually the 4th are people in active military or veteran status, regardless of the existence of veterans or folks in that employment context. So for example, most of the places that we do this survey have less than 1% of active military or veterans in their employment, in their workplace. Yet veterans and active military are always in that top 3 or 4. which I can just go on another rant and dissertation about. That's a good thing. That means that, that's a good work environment, but absence the existence of the veterans doesn't necessarily change the environment. Anyways, rant aside, on the bottom, always on the bottom two are always people who are not US citizens and transgender people. And then these different groups, people that are not Christian, lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer people, folks whose English is a learned language, low socioeconomic status, parents and caregivers, people with disabilities, people of color, Christians, and women fall somewhere in this yellow category. Now, I share this because I want us to use it as a thought exercise. And what I tell clients and folks that I work with often is that we, and I'll say this for us, we cannot control what happens out there. We cannot control the conditions in which people experience discrimination, harassment, intolerance outside of these walls. What we can control is inside the walls. And so the goal should not be to try and change everything out there. But when people in these lower ends of this thermometer walk through our doors, there should be a clear difference in how people feel like the environment is. So if I feel discriminated as a trans person out in the world, when I walk through these doors, I want to feel radically different. I want to feel that this is an affirming place to be. And that's when we know that we are being an affirming environment, not just a tolerant one. When I can be my full self and there's a felt difference, that is when we know. So with this kind of on top of our minds, I want to walk us through some thought exercises. Imagine we are using this tolerance thermometer to gauge the climate here at UUSS. You're asked to take a survey. Everybody fills this out. We get 100% participation rate, which as a researcher, that would make me so happy. On a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate the environment for these different groups of people? Who would you put on the top based on what we know, who's here, what things we talk about, what things we don't talk about, our environmental cues? Is the evidence that we're using to make this determination based on something that we can prove in terms of we can hold it, or is it a feeling? Which of these experiences would you rate and know to be true based on your lived experience, and which ones would you be rating based on the perception of another person's experience? Now imagine your workplace or your former workplace or a place you spend a lot of time. How would these numbers change? Would they be similar? Would they be different? Why would they change? What conditions have changed to make the numbers different? Because when we're talking about what the definition of inclusion is and equity, it's the conditions to which there are barriers or opportunities for people to feel affirmed and included. We really have to focus on the conditions, right? Now take this same thermometer and imagine your home, imagine your family. Where would you rate your family? Your nuclear family or your extended family? Where would you rate that environment for these different groups of people? And what evidence are you using to make that consideration? One way we can think about using this thermometer that, with clients and things like that, we've used it with is, we post the thermometer up on the wall. And when we're making considerations around programs or services, we put it up there and we say, if the bottom is a 0, right? If that's our new 0, then we need to make sure that we are extra explicit about making sure that we are catering and designing programs and services and conversations for those groups of people because everybody will benefit from it. Because the goal of all this is that everyone's experiences get up to the green. It's not like we kick people that are in the green down to the red. The goal is that we build such a robust and affirming environment that everyone that's in the orange and the yellow moves up to the green. And we all get to experience an affirming environment. Because there's a difference between tolerating and affirming. Our baseline should be to not accept intolerance and then pursue the path that helps all feel affirmed in their version of freedom and actualization. So the last thought exercise that I hope you take out into your day and the weeks to come is what can you do today to make sure you are changing the conditions around you to refuse intolerance and move towards affirmation. There's a few places in my life that I feel like this is possible, and here is one of those places that has the foundation for this kind of environment. This is truly a place that has a foundation to grow and mature as an organization and a group of people, a living, breathing organism that can move groups from the bottom up to the green. Because the goal is that all find refuge from the difficulties of the outside world here. May it be so today and every day forward. Our benediction today is Democracy's Benediction by Lucas Herget. We are democracy, unruly, unfinished, unrelenting, people of rebellious joy taking to the streets, underground resilience resisting complacence, the pleasure of activism organizing into simple hope. We are democracy, people of principles taking on principalities, witnessing the worth of those called unworthy. Justice just now gains ground. Integrity of interdependent existence extending living democracy in heads, hands, hearts. We know that democracy can die, ossify, brittle byproducts of bygone idealists, plotting politicians pirating votes, corporations cannibalizing our care for the world. Look, it can wither, distend, come to an end. Democracy, today we will love you alive, make you ours, make you thrive, and vote as though our hope is on the line.